Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people across the state of Mississippi who are working so hard in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. You know, we are. It's cruising week. Cruising's in full bloom. Had the opportunity to visit with Rob Siegler yesterday. And if you missed that show, you can go to your favorite podcast, look up the Ricky Mathews Show, or to Facebook or YouTube. We went through the whole thing, a little bit about the history of this wonderful opportunity to showcase coastal Mississippi, all of the cities that make up coastal Mississippi, events happening in each of the cities. It's a great way actually to spread people out. But we talked a little bit at the beginning of the show with Hurricane Helene having gone through Florida and then through the Appalachian states, and the amazing disaster that became. Of course, we can assume that Hurricane Helene, that name Helene, will be retired now. A lot of those people are going through what we went through, which is this thought, how in the world will we ever get ourselves out of this mess? I mean, how do we even begin to think about this? And I think what cruising is, and maybe it's a nice emblem for people in those communities to look back at to say, how can the communities that make up coastal Mississippi that were literally wiped off the face of the earth, how do they come back? And cruising is a way to show you what is possible when there's determination and tenacity and resilience and just a strong vision to not just rebuild back what we had, but to build back better, bigger and better. And that is certainly what cruising does. It gives us a chance to showcase that. One of the cities that Rob and I talked about that has become quite popular in the cruising world during Cruising the Coast is the city of Pascagoula. I talk about it a lot on this show, either with the mayor or Paige Roberts or various developers. I had a great conversation with my next guest, and I was amazed that it was back in 2020 that we had this conversation. But Richard Chenoweth is a longtime restaurateur. He's an inn owner. He's an important leader in the city of Pascagoula. He recently got an award. We'll tell you a little bit more about that award here in just a second. But the award gives us a chance to bring attention back to what is happening in downtown Pascagoula. The revitalization in this historic district has been something to behold. And I'm amazed that my friend Richard, who I've known for a lot of years, is still swinging in his 70s. So we'll get some indication of if he has any plans to retire anytime soon. But before we go any further, let me welcome Richard back to the Ricky Mathews Show. Richard, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Ricky. How about you?
I'm doing good too, man. Look, we got a lot.
Show. Let me tell you have a great show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, man. It's been a real blessing. We've had over 1,200 conversations in the past, nearly 5 years. It's a labor of love for me. I do in retirement from the studio here at the house. And it's given me, as you and I have discussed before, an opportunity to do the one thing I miss most about being a publisher, and that is connecting with people in the community. To some extent, actually, the show has given me the opportunity to dive way deeper into developing relationships and hearing the stories behind the stories in this long form interview format that I really didn't get a chance to do when I was at a publisher, because I was always moving so quickly. So it's been a real blessing and a real opportunity to showcase not just coastal Mississippi, but Mississippi and people like you. So let's for people who didn't hear our conversation before, let's give them a little bit of history about Richard and what led you to Pascagoula, and then what ultimately what are your investments here in that wonderful city.
I tell you what led me to Pascagoula was my father. He worked for Ingalls Shipbuilding. He was a nuclear engineer. Back then, they didn't, you had a short school. They said if it started glowing, run. And so there wasn't much to it. But they built nuclear submarines at Ingalls in the 60s. And so we moved here from Pensacola, Florida in 1962. And, immediately started developing friends and everything like that through my mother's contacts and my dad's contacts, and it just kept me anchored here. I have so many good friends over the years, and I still have childhood friends that we, hang around with last weekend and stuff like that. So it's all about the neighborhood and it's all about the friends and it's about the business.
So let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial history. People may know Richard well through Scranton's restaurant, this like mainstay restaurant in Pascagoula. He has the Grand Magnolia. He's in the inn business. He's really in the hospitality business. Let's put it that way. So let's tell a little bit about that story, Richard.
Well, it just seems like I've always worked. My mother and father got a divorce when I was in junior high, and so I went out and started working. I worked at a gas station. I worked delivering newspapers. I sold fireworks. I've had a beer bar over the years, and just one thing led to another. I just kept going back to the restaurant business. I don't know why. I was in the insurance business, which was really very easy compared to the restaurant business, but I just kept being drawn back to it. And my business partner, Jack Pickett, and I decided to start Scranton's. And actually, we started in 78 and finally got it open in 82.
Wow. So 4 years and in a really unique location. Tell about the location.
We're in the old fire station in downtown Pascagoula that used to be the location of the volunteer fire department, and then that burned down in the 20s. And so when they rebuilt this. The current building is 100 years old this year. It opened in 1924, in August of 1924, and basically we opened in August of 1982. And it served as City Hall and the fire station and the Civic Center of its day. So we had the upstairs, which was 3,200 feet of rock maple dance floor that the volunteer fire department would hold their dances, and they would hold boxing matches, just anything civic oriented was held up there, town meetings and everything like that. So we had that, and then we had the downstairs, and so we made the fire station part our bar, and then we call it the engine room, and then the City Hall side is where the restaurant is, was the grab and go market is, and everything like that. We kind of completely converted everything after COVID. So we took a 180-degree pivot to adapt to the changing times and everything like that after COVID. And then we took the upstairs that we used for catering. That's how it got us into the catering business, because people kept saying, "Hey, can we use the upstairs?" And so we started. That led us into that path, and eventually. During COVID, we decided to put the apartments upstairs, and we were incentivized by the Pascagoula Redevelopment Association, and so they incentivized us to do it because they were confident that if our apartments were successful, then more people would do it. When we opened our 4 apartments, that was in 4 years ago, and now we're up to 67 apartments downtown.
And Richard, that's such an amazing evolution, and it makes you wonder why it didn't. You mentioned you wish you would have seen the kind of development that is happening earlier in your career, but you think about the proximity to downtown Pascagoula to Ingalls. I mentioned this on the show yesterday. A lot of Ingalls employees tended to work, drive out into the rural areas to live and whatever. But there's a whole new wave of employees today that really want to live closer to work. They want to, and retirees want to live downtown where there's activities where they can be in a walkable community. They can go shop or go do entertainment or go to a restaurant. They want it to be within a walkable distance. But if you think about the millions of dollars that have been spent in downtown, now that we have a historic district, have all this exciting development that is happening, it takes. Haley Barbour used to always say that the government can help us get back on our knees, but it's private enterprise that's going to get us back on our feet. So you're starting to see all this massive investment in downtown, and you can literally see it. You're right. You were sort of an early innovator. You were taking the risk and showing people, yeah, this mixed use approach can happen, but it's really happening in a big way now, isn't it?
It really is. You could have bought anything you wanted for, dimes on the dollar just 6 years ago. I mean, the downtown was vacant. The storefronts, so many storefronts were just vacant and everything. They had little signs. There's a lot of opportunity in here, but nobody took it up. But once everybody got united in Pascagoula, that's what changed things.
I can't agree more. Let's look, when we get back on the other side, we'll actually talk about that. And we'll talk about this recent recognition, this honor that was bestowed upon Richard Chenoweth that we want to talk about as well. It really talks about the importance of Main Street and being involved in Main Street programs across the state of Mississippi. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studios. We all celebrate cruising the coast and this amazing opportunity we have to showcase cities all across coastal Mississippi. And one of those cities is Pascagoula. And one of the early innovators in Pascagoula is Richard Chenoweth, who Scranton Museum. Scranton Museum. Listen to me. The Scranton's restaurant. The Grand Magnolia probably. We'll tell you, a little bit more about that. I remember when we talked in 2020, the whole concept of grab and go. We were watching this pandemic unfold. You literally changed the entire concept of the restaurant. You built the apartments that you mentioned just a few minutes ago. You opened up grab and go. You really bit off a bunch, but you had a sense of where this was all headed, and you were willing to take the risk. But it was a big moment for you, wasn't it?
It really was. I'm always studying and looking for ideas and stealing ideas. I guess you'd say from other restaurant concepts and everything. I'm just always constantly trying to read, and I just saw where fast casual was moving more into taking over a bigger place like Chipotle is a perfect example of it and everything. And we were you had to be touched by the hostess, then you had to be touched by the waitress. And, there was so many touches and people were in a hurry. And that was the biggest complaint they complained about, is that they couldn't get their ticket after lunch and everything. So I just took the opportunity to completely change it around and pivot during COVID. With disaster comes opportunity, and so that's what we did, and it's really worked out. I mean, we can serve more people, on these big Zonta Festival days that's coming up, the 1st of October. I mean, the first weekend in October coming up. We can serve more people, twice as many people as we did in the past.
Wow. That's really incredible. If you so list out the various businesses that you're involved in, so we make sure we describe those properly.
Let's see. Let me tell you. Well, basically, the first primary business was Scranton's restaurant. Then we involved in the Scranton's catering, and then we ended up buying the Grand Magnolia Ballroom and Suites about 15 years ago. And so that helped expand our reach into the catering business by giving us the ballroom and the house. We have 7 suites in the house, and people come in just like this weekend. We've got a wedding there this weekend that they rent the ballroom, the grounds. We're on 3.5 acres, and then they rent the whole house. So they take over the whole thing. On Saturday morning, it looks like a huge beauty parlor, because you go in there and all the bridesmaids are in there with power strips running around, blow dryers all over the place, curling irons, and all kinds of things. Everybody's getting ready for the wedding that day. So it really does do a dual purpose in situations like that too. And you spoke about trying to be close to Ingalls. I mean, I've got some guys staying there right now that they have a contract with Ingalls that they come in about every quarter to service, and 6 of them take over the whole house. and use it for their headquarters and just drive, close to Ingalls. So those are my basic businesses that.
So what is true is this evolution of various investors coming into the city and betting their ranches on the success of Pascagoula, that all these pieces and parts will fit together to create a thriving sense of place that makes people want to not just visit there, but actually live there. And, if you were to describe it, let's go back a little bit, Richard, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. If someone were to come into downtown, you mentioned some vacant buildings and storefronts and whatever, but describe sort of what your feeling was, what you saw when you got there, even though you were heavily invested even in those days. And then contrast it with what you see today. But let's start with what you would have seen 10 or 15 years ago.
10 or 15 years ago, you would have seen, there used to be a J.C. Penney in a building right next door to us, and then it became Josette's. So Josette's was still there. Across the street used to be a Scotty's, but it was vacant. There was a gift shop there that's no longer there anymore. Brumfield's was out of business, and the building was still there on that corner, and then the buildings next to it were vacant. And then you went down, and there was a law office on the corner, and then across from that was the bargain annex. But then you went back from there, heading back towards Scranton's, and there was another law office. There used to be a McClellan's department store years ago. And then the businesses, there was a lawyer on the corner, which she's gone now, and that building is being renovated now. And that was about it. I mean, law offices and the bargain annex. And I'm trying to think, there was our restaurant. Nobody else, the restaurants that had been around were closed, were gone. So it was pretty bleak 15 years ago.
Yeah, what's interesting in my conversations in the past with you, and then talking with people like Paige Roberts and the mayor today, who describes his excitement for what's happening downtown. But it took the community coming together and saying, okay, now look, we got to have a vision. We have to find mechanisms, granting mechanisms. The historic district came about. Lots of things began to happen that created the collection of opportunities for investors to come in and buy into a vision and have the opportunity, to potentially get some additional grant money to kind of push this forward. But you had to really kind of change the approach. I mean, it was a true downtown planning effort that was a very different approach than what you had done in the past. In fact, you probably didn't even have an approach in the past. It was more serendipitous before, but this was much more legitimate, wasn't it?
Yes. Before you had, we had the Downtown Merchants Association, which I'm still the last president of that, before it, went away, faded away. And so that was about it that you had representing the downtown. Then the Main Street Association came along with Rebecca Davis and everything like that. And, they were struggling trying to do things, but finally the chamber came together. Paige Roberts and everything. Then the PRA, Pascagoula Redevelopment Association, the tax incentives came together. The historical district came together. The reason why we were one of the first is because we were already on the historical register. So we didn't have to wait for it to be all declared a historical area to get the tax incentives and everything like that. So that's why we were that put us in a position to be the leaders. And then you had industry, Chevron, Ingalls, everybody, there's several other ones. I can't get them all, but they all came together on a single purpose. And that was to start trying to get the downtown developed, because they know once we get the downtown moving, it'll move out from there. It'll ripple out to the rest of the town. You're already seeing investments farther out from the downtown. people complained in the beginning, well, you're just doing everything downtown. But that's how it started back in the old days. You started with the town, and then it rippled out from there. We're just going back to the basics.
Yeah, it is. There's just so much to this. I couldn't help but think too, when you started talking about rippling out, the impact that Katrina had on redefining what the base flood elevation needed to be for flood insurance for the city was very detrimental to the city's ability to develop in the future. The abolishment of the grandfather clause and all this stuff had deep conversation with George Freeland and Mary Martha at the Jackson County Economic Development Foundation and the multi-state effort that's underway to try to bring attention to this flawed system, this flood program 2.0. One thing I thought, though, and I've had deep conversation with Frank Bordeaux about it. He's in the real estate business here in coastal Mississippi, and the former, you know him, but the former chairman of the Republican Party of Mississippi. The thing that Frank and I have talked about is that maybe insurance companies might be a little more tolerant now to have conversations about some kind of national catastrophic backstop or catastrophic coverage. And if anything, Helene hitting the way it did and where it did, and the number of uninsured people that are going to be impacted by that, it may actually increase even more so the multi-state conversation we need to have to fix what we all know is a major problem with our flood program. But in spite of that, the city has continued to evolve, and the city has continued to find success. And it's amazing to watch it, because at first, you get a little success here, and maybe somebody builds a few apartments over there. I remember walking with Paige through the city. It was later in 2020 as things were kind of under construction. You could sense that, yes, they get it, but still they were betting on the come in a big way, actually. And then more investors, and then more investors, and then as you pointed out, you could have bought land for a dime on a dollar at one point. And now, is there any available land left in downtown Pascagoula? It's amazing the evolution that has occurred, I say, just in the past 5 years.
Yep.
Okay. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Richard Chenoweth. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have Richard Chenoweth, a longtime leader in tourism and hospitality. He's an entrepreneur in Pascagoula, and recently received the Beverly Meng Revitalization Champion Award. This is a really important award that, as I said, it gives us a chance to not only focus on him as a leader, but really it brings focus to what's happening in downtown Pascagoula. It's actually named after the longtime former executive director for Mississippi Main Street Association. But you've always seen Main Street as a way of sort of tapping into some best practices, not just in Mississippi, but around the country. You've always kind of been innovative in that way, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I just know, I experienced it in the beginning when I got in business. I thought that I couldn't leave. I thought that I had to be there, and I was isolated and, fighting the battle every day to, stay in business. And restaurant business is really, really hard. And to make it successful, it just takes a lot of work. And then when I finally started getting out and joining the Restaurant Association and doing a little traveling and everything like that, I realized this is what incentivized me, being able to pick up the phone or call a peer and talk about a problem through an association. I did it with the Bed and Breakfast Association. I'm still belong to the International Caterers Association. I'm on their Ed Foundation. It's all about contacts. It's all about relationships, and it can't be just about yourself. You can't sit there and think, I've got to do this all by myself, because it takes your competition. I have good relationships with several caterers and several restaurateurs, and we try to help up and coming. We'd rather compete against somebody that has knowledge than somebody that doesn't, and so yeah. I just see the value of it. And, Main Street is one of them, Jackson County Economic Development Foundation. I did forget to mention them earlier as far as being part of the group that got together, and so it just takes relationships.
Yeah,
and this is a perfect
listen,
example of it.
I haven't mentioned this to you, but I have a cousin and his family who own a catering and wedding business in Springville, Alabama. And the name of it is that his father used to own this farm, and he bought the farm from his father when his father retired. And they're already in the catering business and doing wedding cakes and stuff like that. But they went in full bore into holding weddings. And over the many, many years, this is over 30 years, they've developed it. They can do 5 weddings in one day to give you a sense of it. Outdoor weddings. You can have a more rustic wedding inside of kind of a barn setting. They got this huge chapel. They can literally do it all. But I've watched them and what they've done, and it's a labor of love. You in order to do what you do, Richard, and what you and your team do, and you said it's true about the restaurant business. You got to love it. You got to be passionate about it. And you hear it over and over again. But owners that get far removed from the day-to-day of managing the brand of a restaurant or a catering business or a wedding business, you get too far away from it, you can lose it overnight. You have got to be focused on it. So it is a labor of love, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, you walk out the door, you don't have a time clock. You walk out the door, and if you're not thinking about it while you're at home or thinking something, watching TV and an idea, I'm always looking for ideas, always. And always thinking about how can I do this dish better at Scranton's? How can I tweak it? How can I improve it? Just always.
Yeah, it's a labor of love and of constant improvement, and that's just the way it is. Hey, when I went to break though, we were talking about this cadre of partners that it takes to pull this off. We talked about Main Street and downtown, stakeholders and the chamber and the city and all these efforts. And I mentioned the Jackson County Economic Development Foundation, but it takes a village, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. And George Freeland has helped us over the years, and he's always been a good partner of ours. And I like I said, it just takes us all.
And the work they're doing I mentioned the flood insurance program, but the work that they're doing on that is hugely important, isn't it?
I used to sell flood insurance, and what you were saying about the national flood insurance program and everything like that we need to have a better conversation. I went to my first seminar in I got out of school in 1978. I joined Prudential Insurance in 1978, and I went to my first flood insurance seminar to become licensed. And the guy told us, don't ever let anybody tell you they don't need flood insurance. He said, I've seen it flood in the mountains. And over the years, I've seen it flood everywhere. These people that just got flooded in, North Carolina, they didn't expect it. I mean, it's unbelievable what can happen. And that's why I think everybody's got to have flood insurance.
There's a map that I focused on when I've had several shows about this, but there's one particular map that I show where I think 90-something% of counties in America have had some kind of disaster declaration, whether it be fire or flood or earthquake or tornado or hurricane or whatever. So many. And the thing is, we tend to talk about the coast too much as it relates to risk, when there's probably no place you can live in that's not going to have some impact. Now, look, I spent a lot of time in the areas of North Carolina and Tennessee and Georgia. I love that part of the country. I can't tell you how much I love that part of the country. Going along those winding roads, with these creeks off to the side. And I mentioned on my shows in the recent past where we've all gotten out of our cars and walked down to those creeks and sat on those stones. These creeks became raging rivers. But if you go back in time, I didn't realize this, but Hurricane Katrina had a very substantial impact in certain communities along there with the same kind of floods. There was a flood back in the early 1900s that sort of did the same thing. It was this terrible confluence of a hurricane facing a front and causing, epic rain in the Appalachian Mountains. People want to say that's a new thing, but it's not. There's, if you go back in history, you'll find usually some indication that there needed to be coverage in those areas, but people only tend to remember the recent past. We need catastrophic coverage in America today. That's clearer today than it's ever been.
I was on Lake Powell last summer, and you could see where it was raining, maybe 50 miles away, and all of a sudden we started having waterfalls. Where that rain was coming back to Lake Powell. It just water is just, it's mean. It's very mean.
It is so mean, and the full scale of that, we still don't fully appreciate it. But you got not just houses that were washed away, but the ground underneath them are gone. Yeah. I mean, same thing. Roads are washed away, but the ground underneath the roads are gone. It's going to take a monumental, multi-year effort to bring it back.
And we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. More and more stories are going to be coming out in the next week or so of the devastation out there.
Yeah, because it's in so many different places. As people start to get cell service and have access to technology, they're sharing their videos of their experience while this thing was going down. And there's just some heartbreaking stories coming out of that part of the country. But again, this whole notion around catastrophic coverage will impact coastal Mississippi, I think, in a positive way, because it will enable us, as Frank Bordeaux has helped me learn, it will enable us to spread the risk. And if we have a federal backstop of some sort, it might make the reinsurance industry a little bit easier to get our head around, because as we have learned, and as you know, if you're in the insurance business, that insurance is more of a global issue. I mean, what happens around the globe determines how the reinsurance markets work. And reinsurance is the insurance that insurance companies get. So it's a complex world that we live in. All these parts are interconnected. But making hurricane-prone areas of America feel some additional unnecessary burden when we should all be sort of sharing in that burden is something we've really got to get our heads around. And again, I think Jackson County Economic Development Foundation under Mary Martha's and George's leadership, I think, are helping put our arguments on the table in a really big way. So we described the way it was, and it was bleak, and it was a case for downtown Pascagoula that was screaming for leadership and screaming for vision, and for a more collaborative approach to say, how can we do this? Not just how can we do this and what is the vision of it, but where are the granting mechanisms, and how can we start to draw down some federal dollars that will enable us to do what we want to do in downtown Pascagoula? When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Richard Chenoweth and get him to describe what you see today as you drive through downtown Pascagoula. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have really, really enjoyed this conversation with Richard Chenoweth, who is a longtime entrepreneur in downtown Pascagoula, has a number of businesses, including the iconic Scranton's Restaurant. Been involved in tourism, been involved in Mississippi Main Street, most recently recognized as a leader in Mississippi Main Street, which is a great opportunity to celebrate people like Richard, but it's also an opportunity to bring the focus to Pascagoula, as a lot of this conversation has been, so we can all appreciate what it takes to build a great community. And look, if you were to drive around Pascagoula today, what would you see contrasted to what you described you would have seen 10 or 15 years ago?
Well, I mean, the biggest noticeable thing is now we have not just Scranton's downtown. We have Preservation Grill. We have Paradise Grill. It used to be called Preservation. We have Paradise Grill. We have Italian Bistro. We have Uncle Joe's Pizza. We have Jack's by the Tracks. We have Off the Hook. We have Two Sisters Catering. We have one other restaurant. Gosh. Oh, well, it's slipping up. But there's only one vacant building, and it's under development right now, and we have one vacant piece of property at the end of Delmas. So, it's completely changed around. All the buildings are through. They're building a craft brewery right across the street from us now, where they're doing a build out of an old building. There's a brand new hotel downtown, the Whiskey Hotel, that took the place where the Brumfield's building was. There's a dentist working to develop the building where the Bargain Annex used to be. So that's, just things have just completely flipped around.
It is amazing to see what happens when life comes back to a city. So not only would you see the millions of dollars that has been spent on revitalization downtown, but you also see life in the city, don't you, Richard?
Yeah. I mean, there's life 24 hours a day now, whereas, at night at 5 o'clock, we were dead. You had to know where we were at Scranton to come down there at night. We were packed during lunch, but as compared to nighttime to daytime, we were just dead at night. I always joked about the tumbleweeds rolling down the street at night, but now there's activity all the time. And I talked about the rippling out. Well, now it's rippling out. It's going down to the other end of Delmas, where there's investment down there. It's rippled out to where the old ice house was. That's all going to be, shops and condos and offices and apartments and things like that. They're right there on Highway 90. So it's rippling out.
And the old depot.
Right. The old depot. I can't wait. The last good image I have of that is Jimmy Buffett standing in front of it, taking a picture with his hands up, framing the Pascagoula sign. You can find that one online, That's the last. And I used to go down there and meet my grandmother when she came from Indianapolis. She took the train, and we'd put pennies on the tracks and play with the flare, Yeah. So I have a lot of memories.
So many stories. But, I would hope that as people hear this story, people who may have the ability to invest would hear this and say, Pascagoula is somewhere I need to go take a closer look at. Mm-hmm. That's what you hope too, isn't it?
Right. I used to tell people just a few years ago, I said, you can still get in on the ground floor. Well, now you're past the ground floor. Now you're on the second floor. Now you're going to have to go buy property from people that, were smart enough to buy it on the ground floor.
What I remember so well about Andreas Juani being here after Hurricane Katrina, the famed architect and planner who's the father of new urbanism. One of the big complaints about him was that when he came into a city and they were focused on making it walkable and a place where people would begin to thrive, that the success would cause real estate values to go up, and then some form of gentrification would happen where people would have to move further and further away from downtown. But isn't it interesting that one of the negatives to finding a sense of place in a place like Pascagoula is that the values go up? But that's the way it's supposed to work, isn't it, Richard?
It really is. And even after the hurricane, values started going up. And I'm sitting there going, I asked a real estate guy he just happened to pull up behind Scranton. We weren't even open yet. We still had 2 more weeks to go to get back open. And I said, why is it after a disaster like this that property values go up? And he said, can I be honest? He said, because it flushes all the crap away. You're not going to rebuild old houses. You're not going to rebuild old projects and stuff like that. Everything's going to come back new. And he was so right.
It takes time, but it definitely happened. And one of the reasons it happened because we were very, very committed to not rebuilding just what we had, but building back bigger and better, something Haley Barber really challenged us to do. He said, what will our kids and our kids say of us? Well, they say that we got it, and I think they will definitely say that we got it. That is for sure. Richard, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Good spending time with you too, Ricky.
You bet. This has been Richard Chenoweth. Yeah, you bet. Go to Scranton's. Go get a fine meal if you haven't been there in a while.
I'm hungry. My stomach's growling.
God bless you and have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow.
You too. Take care.